I was standing in my son's living room, still holding the warm casserole dish I'd brought, when my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "Helen, our family needs space. You don't fit into our plans anymore." Just like that. As if I were a piece of old furniture they were finally brave enough to throw out. I turned to Mark, my only child, hoping he'd laugh, roll his eyes, say, "Mom, ignore her." But instead, he wouldn't even meet my eyes. He swirled the ice in his glass and mumbled, "She's right. We have to prioritize our own life now." The room got so quiet I could hear the hum of their refrigerator. And something inside me didn't just break, it collapsed, the way an old house gives way after one storm too many. I stood there, 72 years old, holding a casserole nobody wanted, realizing the truth I'd been too proud to say out loud. My son didn't see me as family anymore. Welcome to Life Voices, where family drama turns into late-life justice. If you're watching, tell us your city in the comments, we always read them. I hadn't planned on staying long that night. Just a simple family dinner, nothing fancy. I'd even worn my soft navy cardigan, the one Mark used to call my comfort sweater, when he was a boy. I'd baked a chicken and rice casserole, the same one he always asked for when he had the flu. Funny how mothers keep cooking for their children long after they've stopped needing it. The truth was, I'd been looking forward to that evening all week. Ever since my husband, Don, passed 3 winters ago, the house has felt too big, too quiet, too aware of every ache in my bones. I talk to the TV more than I should. I water the plants twice a day just to have something alive to care for. So when Mark texted, "Dinner Sunday, 6 p.m., it felt like something warm had been handed back to me. I brought little gifts for the kids, too. Nothing expensive, stickers for Emma, a puzzle for little Jamie. I even remembered that Jamie likes the kind with farm animals, not dinosaurs. I know these things. Grandmothers always do. On the drive to their house, I rehearsed small compliments for my daughter-in-law, Vanessa. That's something you learn with time. Daughters-in-law don't want help, they want approval. I was ready to give her that. I never wanted to be the meddling mother. When I pulled into their driveway, I saw the lights glowing through the front windows, warm and buttery. I could hear Emma laughing inside. For a moment, I felt like the world was right again. But the door didn't open the way it used to. 3 years ago, the kids would barrel into me before I even stepped inside. Mark would take the casserole from my hands, and Vanessa would say something polite like, "Helen, this looks amazing." But now, there was hesitation. The kind where you know something is off, even before a word is spoken. Vanessa opened the door only halfway. "Oh, you're early," she said. It was 5:59. I stepped inside anyway, determined not to let my nerves show. "I brought the casserole," I said with a smile. "And some little surprises for the kids." Vanessa sighed, as if even that were inconvenient. "You really don't have to bring things every time." But I do, I thought. Because that is how I show love. Inside, the house felt strangely tense. No music playing, no chatter, just the smell of roasted vegetables and something like discomfort. Emma glanced up from the couch but didn't run to me. She gave a small wave. Jamie didn't look up at all. Maybe Vanessa had told them not to interrupt adult conversations. Maybe that was all. I kept telling myself not to read too much into things. But the air felt thick, the way it does right before a storm breaks. Dinner was simple: chicken, vegetables, store-bought rolls. I placed my casserole on the counter. No one touched it. No one even removed the foil. We sat down, and for a moment, I let myself believe we were still a family. Mark asked politely about my garden. Vanessa commented on the weather. Emma whispered something to her mom and was told to, "Shush, not now." I kept waiting for that familiar warmth, the one where your child looks at you and you see that little boy inside them, the one who needed you. But Mark kept checking his phone, tapping his fingers on the table, glancing at Vanessa as if waiting for a cue. And then the cue came. Vanessa placed her napkin down slowly, precisely, as if she had practiced the motion in the mirror. She looked at me with a calmness that made the words even colder. "Helen," she said, "we need to talk about boundaries." My stomach tightened. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them still. "Boundaries?" I repeated softly. "Yes." She crossed her arms. "We appreciate everything you've done, but dropping by so often, bringing food, calling multiple times a week, it's too much. We're trying to focus on our nuclear family. My nuclear family. I'd never liked that phrase. It always sounded like something waiting to explode. I turned to Mark, searching his face for something, surprise, disagreement, anything. But he only stared at his plate. Vanessa continued, we need space to grow as our own unit. And honestly, your involvement has been overwhelming. A strange ringing started in my ears. I forced myself to breathe. Overwhelming? I asked quietly. I didn't know you felt that way. We didn't want to hurt your feelings, she said, her tone making it clear she didn't mind hurting them now. But it's becoming a pattern. You show up, you bring things, you insert yourself into decisions, we just can't keep accommodating it. I blinked, trying to absorb the words as gently as possible, as if they were hot coals I had to hold without flinching. I only wanted to help, I whispered. We don't need help, she said flatly. We're capable adults. My eyes drifted to the casserole still untouched on the counter. I thought about all the nights I brought them meals after the babies were born. The afternoons I watched the kids when Vanessa needed a break. The savings from Don's pension I used to help them buy this very house. Was all of that overwhelming, too? I swallowed the ache rising in my throat. I'm sorry if I've overstepped, I said, choosing every word with the care of someone handling broken glass. I never meant to cause any discomfort. Mark finally spoke, but his voice was small. Guilty. Mom, we just want a little distance right now. For us. For us. Not for all of us. The divide was suddenly so clear I could feel it under my feet, wide and deep and permanent. I nodded slowly, afraid that if I opened my mouth again, I would cry. And I wasn't going to give them that. Not in front of my grandchildren. Not while I still had a sliver of dignity left to hold on to. We finished dinner in a silence that tasted metallic. When I stood to leave, no one asked me to stay a little longer. No one asked if I got home safely. Mark didn't walk me to the door. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, the last bit of sunlight fading behind the houses, I felt something settle in my chest. Not brokenness, not anger, but a kind of heavy understanding. They didn't see me as family anymore. Not really. And the part that hurt the most? Somewhere along the way, I had stopped seeing it coming. I barely slept after that dinner. I kept replaying the moment Vanessa folded her napkin like a judge preparing a verdict. The way Mark avoided my eyes. The untouched casserole on the counter. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, wondering how a mother becomes unnecessary. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I never drank, staring at the steam curling upward like a question I couldn't answer. The silence of my home felt heavier than usual. Even the old clock above the stove seemed ashamed to tick. That's when the small signs, the ones I had been brushing aside for months, began lining up in my mind, like little soldiers I had refused to see. The first one was harmless at the time. Mark had asked for the login to my utility account. Just makes it easier for me to help you, Mom, he'd said. Help me with what? I'd always paid my own bills. But I handed it over because when your son asks to help, your heart gives the benefit of the doubt. Then there was Vanessa's joke at a barbecue last fall. Oh, Helen loves babysitting, she told her friends. Free childcare is such a blessing. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, not realizing it wasn't a joke. Not realizing they really did see me as free labor, not a grandmother who wanted time with her grandchildren. The calls had changed too. Mark used to call me every Sunday morning on his drive to the grocery store. He'd say, Mom, what are you up to? And I'd pretend I was busier than I was, just so he wouldn't worry. Then the calls stopped being weekly. Then monthly. Then he'd only call when he needed something signed or fixed or watched. The visits grew formal. You coming over this weekend? I would ask. Vanessa needs to check her schedule, he'd reply. His schedule no longer included me. But the biggest sign, the one I refused to face, was the way my grandchildren stopped running into my arms. It happened slowly. One Sunday, Emma hugged me quickly instead of with her whole body. A month later, Jamie wouldn't sit on my lap unless someone told him to. Then one afternoon, Vanessa called the kids to the living room. Give Grandma some space, she said. Space. Such a polite word for distance. I didn't realize then how literal she meant it. That morning, after the sleepless night, everything finally connected with painful clarity. The dismissive comments. The cold greetings. The half-hearted hugs. The lack of invitations. The slow erosion of warmth in every corner of their home. I had mistaken politeness for affection, routine for closeness, habit for love. And the more I thought about it, the clearer one thing became. That dinner wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the confession. Still, I tried to excuse it. Maybe Vanessa had been stressed. Maybe Mark was overwhelmed at work. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But just as I reached for excuses, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Mom, about last night. Vanessa and I didn't mean to make you feel bad. But we really do need space. Less involvement. Less everything. Less everything. As if my entire presence was a weight pressing on their lives. I stared at the message, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed again, deleted it. Finally I just wrote, I hear you. That was all. 3 words. But they felt like swallowing a stone. I set the phone down gently, like it was fragile, like I might break it, or it might break me. Later that afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. The air was crisp, and the sky was that pale blue that only appears after a sleepless night. I walked slowly past the little houses on Maplewood Lane, each one with their perfect lawns and spring wreaths. People waved from porches. I waved back, pretending everything was fine. At the corner of Elm Street, I saw my neighbor Gloria watering her flowers. Helen, you look tired, dear. Everything okay? I forced a smile. Just didn't sleep well. She nodded sympathetically. Family drama? Something inside me cracked, just a little. Something like that, I said. Gloria walked closer, lowering her voice. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. Her kindness brought tears to my eyes so quickly I had to look away. It's funny, sometimes the people who know the least about your life are the ones who see you most clearly. When I got home, I noticed something on my porch, my casserole dish. Empty, not washed, not even inside a bag. Just set down like a package they didn't want. There was a sticky note on top. Thanks. No heart, no signature, not even my name. Just thanks, the kind you say when someone holds a door for you, not the kind you give your own mother. That was the moment it stopped stinging and started sinking. I took the dish inside, washed it quietly, dried it with my softest towel, and placed it back in the cabinet. Everything looked normal. My kitchen was clean, sunlight streamed through the window, my plants were alive. Life had all the appearance of calm. But inside me, something was shifting. Something was cracking open. Something unfamiliar was beginning to grow, slowly, like a seed under frozen ground. Not anger. Not revenge. Just awareness. The realization that maybe, just maybe, the people you pour the most love into can be the very ones who decide you're too much. And that sometimes, the first real blow isn't the insult itself. It's the moment you finally accept it. The day after the casserole incident, I tried to settle back into my routine. I brewed tea, opened the blinds, fed the birds in the yard, tiny habits that usually softened the edges of loneliness. But everything felt different, as if my house had shifted an inch to the left overnight and nothing lined up anymore. Little memories kept rising to the surface, uninvited and sharp. Not big dramatic scenes, just tiny moments I had brushed away as nothing. It was the nothing moments that finally revealed everything. Like the time Mark said he needed to streamline things, and asked for access to more of my accounts. He said it so casually, Mom, let me just help you manage your stuff. I remember handing him the passwords because I trusted him completely. I had been proud he cared enough to help. But afterward, he started making comments. You spend too much on groceries. You don't need cable. You should simplify your finances. They weren't suggestions. They were assessments. Like he was auditing me. Then there was Christmas. I gave the kids books, puzzles, sweaters, things I chose thoughtfully. Meanwhile, Vanessa gave them matching tablets with their initials engraved. She smiled at me and said, mine are more practical. Kids need to stay current. The kids didn't even open my gifts that night. They were too busy with the tablets. In January, I offered to take the kids to the zoo. I had bought tickets weeks in advance. But the night before, Vanessa texted. Actually, we're keeping them home. They're tired. Maybe next month. Next month never came. Then the Sunday I brought over chocolate chip muffins, homemade, still warm in the basket, and Vanessa answered the door with a tight smile. Oh, did you ask first? Ask? I had never needed permission to bring muffins to my grandchildren. But I apologized anyway. She took the basket with 2 fingers, like it was something she didn't want to carry. And the worst one, the moment I ignored at the time, but now it pierced straight through me, was the birthday dinner for Emma 3 months ago. When I arrived, the table was completely set, the candles lit, the cake ready. My seat was in the corner. Not next to Emma, not next to Mark. I asked Vanessa where I should put my gift. "Oh, just add it to the pile," she said, not even glancing up from her phone. Later that night, I overheard Vanessa telling her mother, "Sometimes I feel like Helen wants to parent me. She's too involved. It's smothering." Her mother nodded. "You need strong boundaries with these older women." These older women. I stood in the hallway with a paper plate of cake, hearing myself reduced to a stereotype. But I stayed quiet. I always stayed quiet. I kept telling myself it was my imagination. That things ebb and flow in families. That they still loved me, they were just busy, stressed, tired. But on that morning, the morning after Vanessa told me I didn't fit into their plans, my mind finally let the truth in. The signs hadn't been random. They had been a pattern. A slow, careful distancing, like they were weaning themselves off me. Still, part of me kept clinging to hope. There's something in a mother's heart that refuses to give up on her child. You can be bruised to the bone, but you'll still find excuses for them. You'll still tell yourself they don't mean it. So at around 2 p.m. that day, I decided to call Mark. I thought maybe we could talk it out, clear the air. Maybe Vanessa had been harsh, but he would tell me he still needed me. Wanted me. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Mom, hey," he said, distracted. "This isn't a good time." "I won't keep you," I told him. My voice felt thin. I just wanted to understand what happened last night. There was a pause. Then a sigh. "Mom, we told you. We need space. But I don't want to be a burden," I said softly. "If I've done something wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong," he said. But his tone said otherwise. "It's just, Vanessa feels overwhelmed. And honestly, I get it. You're around a lot. You call a lot. You bring things over all the time. It's too much input. Input. Like I was data clogging up their system. I'm just trying to stay connected," I whispered. "I know. But we're a family now. Our own family. We need room to breathe. You have your life, Mom. We have ours." The knife twisted slowly. I thought I was part of that. Another sigh. "Mom, please don't make this harder." Those words. People use them when they're done with you. "I understand," I said. And I did. In the worst possible way. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed with my hands folded in my lap like a schoolgirl being scolded. My house felt like a museum of memories no one wanted anymore. That afternoon, I drove to the grocery store just to be around other humans. I wandered the aisles without a list, touching cans of soup, reading ingredients I didn't need, pretending I wasn't fighting tears. People around me laughed, chatted, argued gently over brands of cereal. Normal problems. Problems that meant you belonged somewhere. When I got home, the sun had already dipped low. I turned on a lamp, sat in my recliner, and let the quiet hum of the heater wrap around me. I wasn't crying, not exactly. It was something deeper than that. A feeling like you're dissolving slowly, molecule by molecule, until you're just gone. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, one thought finally took shape. A thought I had spent months avoiding. They didn't see me as a mother. They saw me as a service. A service they no longer needed. And it was that realization, not the cold words, not the casserole, not the distance, that finally began to change me. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And once a mother finally admits that her place in her child's life has been downgraded to optional, something inside her starts to wake up. A week passed after that awful dinner, 7 long days where my phone stayed silent except for a few pharmacy reminders and a spam call about refinancing my home. Not a word from Mark. Not a single photo of the kids. Not even a polite, "just checking on you." Every day, I woke up hoping the distance would soften. But silence doesn't soften, it hardens, like a shell forming around a wound you keep pretending doesn't hurt. By the 8th day, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I went into the spare room, the one Don used as his office before he passed, and pulled down the old shoebox from the top shelf of the closet. The cardboard was soft from age, the corners dented. Inside were receipts, legal papers, cards Don had given me for anniversaries, and documents I hadn't looked at in years. I don't even know why I opened it. Maybe some part of me thought I'd find comfort in touching the edges of my old life, when things were simple and love didn't feel conditional. But what I found was something else entirely. There, between old tax returns and warranties for appliances that no longer existed, was a document with my name typed at the top. Power of attorney, temporary. Dated 2 years ago, right after my hip surgery. I remembered signing that. Mark insisted it was just in case I needed help paying bills while I recovered. I had been woozy from medication, grateful he was taking care of things. I hadn't asked questions. He was my son. I set it aside. Then I saw a second document. Durable power of attorney, full authority. Not temporary, not limited, full. My signature was on it. Except it wasn't. Not mine. Close enough to fool a bank teller, but not close enough to fool me. My stomach dropped like I'd stepped off a cliff. I stared at the signature for a long time, nausea creeping up my throat. My son had updated the document, secretly, giving himself full control of my finances. My accounts, my property, my future. A wave of heat flushed through me, followed by a cold so deep I wrapped my arms around myself. I heard my late husband's voice in my head, the way he would say, "Helen, trust your instincts. They never lie." Well, they were screaming now. I picked up my phone and called the only person who might understand, my old neighbor Jean. She lived 3 blocks over, a retired IRS fraud investigator with a mind like a steel trap and a heart gentler than it had any right to be. She answered on the second ring. "Helen, what's wrong?" She could always hear it in my voice. "Can you come over?" I asked. "I found something." She was at my door in 15 minutes, still wearing her gardening gloves. We sat at my kitchen table, the documents spread out between us like evidence in a crime drama. Jean put on her reading glasses, scanned the pages, then looked at me with a grimness I'd never seen her use in real life. "Helen," she said slowly, "this is not right. I thought maybe I signed it and forgot." "No." She tapped the page firmly. "This isn't your signature. And even if it were, the way this was filled out is suspicious. Let's go to your bank. Now." I grabbed my purse. My hands trembled so violently I nearly dropped the keys. At the bank, the manager recognized me, small-town courtesy, and ushered us into a glass office. When we explained the situation, he grew visibly uncomfortable and asked a teller to bring printouts of recent activity. The stack was thick. Jean scanned the pages, her jaw tightening. "Helen," she said quietly, "your son has been making withdrawals." My heart thudded painfully. "How much?" "Small amounts. Spread out. Enough to avoid red flags. 800 here, 400 there, over time." She reached the final page. $31,400. My vision blurred. The room tilted. The manager added softly, "He also set up a rental payment to a storage facility." "Storage?" I whispered. "For what?" Jean stood abruptly. "We're going." I followed her out of the bank like a child following an adult across a busy street. The storage place was 10 minutes away, tucked behind an auto shop. A bored-looking clerk scanned the computer and found the unit number under Mark's name. He handed us the keys without blinking. "You on the list, ma'am," he said. "Says you're authorized." Funny. I wasn't authorized for anything that really mattered. Jean rolled up the metal door. And there it was. My life. Packed into cardboard boxes. Stuff I thought I'd lost. Stuff I hadn't realized was missing. Don's military medals. My mother's jewelry box with her initials carved into the lid. The photo albums I'd torn the house apart looking for last spring. Even the wedding china Don and I received in 1971. All neatly stored. All labeled for resale. A folded piece of paper on top of one box caught my eye. It was a list. Estate liquidation value, estimate. Jean took my arm. "This is financial elder abuse," she said. "We are reporting this." I stood there staring at the neatly stacked boxes, cold air biting at my skin, the concrete beneath my feet feeling like it might swallow me whole. I wasn't confused. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overly involved. My son, my boy, had been planning to take everything. And for the first time in my life, something inside me stopped collapsing and started hardening. Jean squeezed my hand. "Helen, are you ready to fight?" I lifted my chin. My voice didn't shake. Yes, I said, I am. Leaving that storage unit felt like walking out of a crime scene, except the crime wasn't over. It was still unfolding around me, inside me, rewriting everything I thought I knew about my own child. Jean drove us back to my house because my hands were shaking too badly to hold the steering wheel. She didn't turn on the radio. She didn't make small talk. She just kept glancing over at me like she was checking to make sure I was still breathing. Inside, she set her gardening gloves on my counter and said, "Before you start second-guessing anything, listen to me. This wasn't an accident, and it wasn't love. This was deliberate, and you are not crazy." Her words landed like stones dropping into a lake. Heavy, honest, unavoidable. I made tea out of habit, but I didn't drink it. It just sat there steaming between us. Jean pulled out her notepad, she always carried one, as if life might hand her a case at any moment. "First things first," she said. "We secure your accounts." What followed was 3 hours of calls, paperwork, and signatures. We froze my old accounts, opened new ones at a different bank, revoked Mark's access, filed fraud alerts, and documented everything. Jean oversaw it like a general leading a battle. The only time she looked unsure was when she said, "Helen, you understand, he may come after you when he realizes what we've done." "I know," I whispered. But I didn't feel fear. Not yet. Just a strange numb clarity, like the fog had finally burned off and I could see the road for the first time in years. When the last form was filed, Jean rested her hand over mine. "Next step is the police." "The police?" My voice sounded older than I felt. "Helen, $31,000 is not a misunderstanding. The forged signature is not a misunderstanding. The storage unit full of your possessions is not a misunderstanding. This is a crime." She said the word gently, but it still felt like a slap. A crime. My son was committing a crime, against me. I sat in my living room staring at the family portraits lining the wall. Mark at 5, holding a fishing pole nearly twice his height. Mark at 12, running track with a grin. Mark at 28, holding baby Emma in his arms with pride blooming across his face. Where did empathy end? Where did calculation begin? When did he look at me and see opportunity instead of mother? Jean waited while I stared, letting me grieve in real time. Finally, I nodded. "Call them." The officer who arrived an hour later was young enough to be my grandson. He had a soft, concerned expression as he took notes. When he asked, "Do you feel safe in your home, ma'am?" something inside me cracked, not from fear but from the surreal horror of needing to be protected from my own flesh and blood. After he left, Jean squeezed my shoulders. "You did the right thing. You did what any person would have to do." I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow, like my ribs had been scooped out. But bravery isn't loud. Sometimes it's just choosing to protect yourself when the people you love stop protecting you. That evening, as the sun dipped low, my phone buzzed. "Mom, call me. Mom, something is wrong with the accounts. Mom, this is serious. Mom, answer the phone." Then, "Mom, open the door, I'm outside." My heart lurched. I froze where I stood. Jean, who had stayed because she didn't want me alone that night, peered through the peephole. "It's him." Mark knocked again, harder. "Mom, we need to talk." "Open the door." I stepped closer but didn't touch the knob. His voice shifted from frustrated to coaxing. "Mom, you're confused. You don't understand what's happening. I can explain everything." "Explain? Explain the forged signature? Explain the stolen money? Explain the boxes of my life stacked like merchandise?" Jean rested her hand on my arm. "Say what you need to say." I took a deep breath and spoke through the door. "Mark, I've closed the accounts. I've contacted the bank. And the police." Silence. Then a quiet, disbelieving, "Police? You forged my signature. You took my belongings. You accessed money that wasn't yours." His tone changed instantly, slick, like he'd practiced it. "Mom, listen to me. Vanessa and I were worried. You've been forgetful. We thought you needed help." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was exactly the manipulation Jean had warned me about. "You will not put me in a facility," I said, my voice startlingly steady. "You will not control my finances. And you will not speak to me like I'm incompetent." He sighed sharply, the sound of a man who just lost his grip on something he thought he owned. "You're making a mistake," he snapped. A big one. No, I said. I'm correcting one. Jean touched my shoulder gently. I didn't cry. Not then. His footsteps retreated, harsh and angry, down my walkway. When the night finally settled, the house fell quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel every choice, every betrayal, every inch of aging in your bones. Jean hugged me before she left. He underestimated you, she whispered. People always do when a woman gets older. After she drove away, I sat alone on my sofa, letting the silence fill the room. I waited for grief, or guilt, or panic to take over. Instead, something steadier arrived. Relief. Not joy, not triumph. Just a strange, quiet relief. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't asking for a place I wasn't given. I wasn't shrinking to keep the peace. I was choosing myself. And that was the moment the power shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but firmly and permanently. My son had tried to take everything. But he forgot something important. I am still me, and I am not done yet. The morning after Mark pounded on my door, I woke up to a stillness I hadn't felt in years. Not the heavy kind that presses on your chest, this was different. This was the kind of quiet that lets you breathe. The kind that gently suggests, maybe your life isn't over. Maybe it's finally beginning. The police report moved faster than I expected. Jean made sure of that. She walked me through every step, filing the statements, organizing evidence, printing emails, highlighting bank transactions. She handled it with the same precision she once used on tax fraud cases, and I found myself grateful beyond words. Within a few weeks, an investigator contacted me. "We may need to speak with your son," he said gently. His voice held that careful tone people use with elderly women, the same tone Mark had used when he tried to convince me I was confused. But this time, I didn't shrink beneath it. "You do what you need to do," I told him. "I'm not afraid." And I wasn't. Not anymore. Days went by. Then a letter arrived from the district attorney's office. Mark had taken a plea deal, probation, restitution, financial counseling, and a formal admission of wrongdoing. I sat at the kitchen table holding that letter, tracing the embossed seal with my thumb. Probation wasn't prison. It wasn't revenge. But it was truth. And sometimes truth is enough. A week later, I heard through a friend, small towns always whisper, that Vanessa had filed for divorce. Apparently she blamed Mark for bringing trouble into their home. Not for manipulation or greed. Not for what he did to me. No, for embarrassment. I didn't feel satisfaction, but there was something sobering about it. Maybe she was never the root. Maybe she was just another branch of a tree that had been growing crooked for a long time. Meanwhile, my house, once filled with anxiety, felt too big again. Every room echoed. Every hallway reminded me of Dawn. Of Mark. Of years spent hoping for gratitude that never came. One evening, Jean came over with a bottle of good wine, the kind she kept, for emergencies, she said. We sat on my porch as the sun set. "So," she said, pouring us each a glass, "what now?" I stared at the streetlight flickering on. "I don't want to live here anymore." "Where, then?" I hadn't said it out loud yet. The idea had been quietly growing inside me since the day I closed my old accounts. A whisper at first, then a steady hum. "I want the ocean," I said. "I want pine trees and salt air. I want somewhere no one knows me as someone's burden." Jean smiled. "Then go find it." And I did. 2 months later, I packed my car with everything that still felt like mine, not the old life, not the old pain, just the essentials. Clothes, books, photo albums, Dawn's favorite flannel, and the jade plant I'd kept alive for 23 years. I drove west for days, stopping when I wanted, sleeping when I needed, letting the country unfold around me. Mountains, plains, forests, towns with diner signs flickering in neon. Somewhere in Washington, I saw a sign, Seabrook, 12 miles. I didn't know the town. I didn't know anyone there. But something in my chest tugged forward. A quiet yes. Seabrook was the kind of place I had only ever seen on postcards. Little cottages with painted shutters. Wooden porches. Coffee shops where the baristas remembered your name by day 2. A shoreline that seemed to breathe in and out with the tide. I found a rental cottage, small but inviting, with weathered cedar siding and a porch swing that creaked when the wind shifted. The air smelled like pine needles and ocean mist. The first night, I sat on the porch under a blanket, listening to the waves curl over themselves. That sound healed something in me I didn't even know was still bleeding. I joined a book club at the local library. The women welcomed me like I'd been there forever. I didn't tell them anything about Mark or Vanessa or police reports. I just said, I'm starting over, and they nodded like they understood. Every morning, I made coffee and took it out to the porch. Some days I watched surfers. Other days I watched fog drift in like a soft gray scarf wrapping the coastline. I walked on the beach until my calves ached. I learned the names of the shopkeepers. I learned the tides. I learned myself again. Then one rainy afternoon, a letter arrived. The envelope was wrinkled, the handwriting crooked, the ink smudged by water drops. I opened it slowly, expecting maybe a bill forwarded from the old address. Instead, I saw a child's handwriting. Grandma, Dad lied. I miss you. Can I see you someday? Love, Brady. My breath caught. Brady, my grandson. 8 years old. The boy who used to fall asleep on my chest during Sunday movies. The boy who once called me Grandma Bear. I hadn't seen him in months. I thought Vanessa would never let him write to me. I thought maybe he had forgotten me. But children don't forget love. Not real love. I held that letter to my chest as the rain tapped softly against the windows, and something warm bloomed inside me. Hope, yes, but also peace. A deep, steady peace that said, "You are not alone, Helen. You were never meant to disappear." I placed the letter on my mantle, right next to Dawn's photo. I whispered, "We're going to be okay." For the first time in a long time, I believed it. Sometimes I walk along the beach at sunset, the sky turning soft shades of gold and coral, and I think about the woman I used to be. The one who sat waiting by the phone for a son who never called. The one who brought casseroles and gifts and pieces of herself to a house where she was no longer welcome. The one who kept believing love would be enough to make people see her value. But the ocean has a way of telling you the truth gently. Waves don't apologize when they pull back, they just show you what was always beneath the surface. And somewhere between the sound of the tide and the rustle of the pines, I finally understood something I'd been avoiding for years. When people decide you don't matter, it's not your job to prove that you do. It's your job to walk toward the life where you already matter. Mark's choices still ache in me like an old wound on rainy mornings. I won't pretend otherwise. Losing a child without a funeral is a unique kind of grief, quiet, confusing, shameful in ways you don't talk about out loud. But I gained myself. I found a version of me I hadn't met in decades. I learned to cook for one without feeling lonely. I learned to wake up without bracing for disappointment. I learned that starting over at 72 is not only possible, it's powerful. And when I read Brady's letter each night before bed, I'm reminded that love doesn't vanish just because people mishandle it. Sometimes it grows in the places you least expect, like a little boy writing to the grandmother he wasn't allowed to mention. So here's my truth, spoken plainly. If someone tells you that you don't count anymore, that is the exact moment you must start counting yourself first. Not out of spite, but out of survival. Tell me, if someone you loved looked you in the eye and said you were no longer part of their life, what would you do? And before you go, share your story below and hit follow. Somewhere out there, another woman needs to read your courage. Subscribe for more family dramas. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from.